Are you ready for this? Because I don't really remember a lot of what I read, so let's just do it. So in the month of May, I ended up finishing 6 books, and then in June, I read 5. But out of the 5, like, 1 was a graphic novel, 1 was a manga, and 1 was written in verse. And I listened to the audiobook, and it was like 2 hours long. So I just really wasn't feeling it in June. I was going through a massive reading slump, and nothing just sounded good to read. I ended up enjoying majority of what I was reading, but it took me forever to read them. I think most books ended up taking me like a week just to get through, or even longer, because I wasn't in the mood to pick up a book. I was just doing other things. So I'm definitely feeling a lot better, and I'm excited for July. But yeah, here's what I read in May and in June. So forgive me if I'm terrible at just reviewing these, because it has been a while. It feels like it's been forever since I read these books. So you're not going to get the most concise reviews from me, but I will kind of give you my general thoughts and my ratings on these. So the first book I ended up finishing in May was No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a mystery thriller novel where we're following Darby. She's on her way to Utah to go visit her mother, and there's a huge blizzard, so she's forced to stop at this rest stop to wait out the storm. Well, she parks next to a van that has a child in an animal crate, and obviously she's freaked out and she wants to know who like abducted this child, and pretty much things just kind of take off from there. It's a very fast-paced mystery thriller, and I honestly didn't see a lot of what happened coming. It was pretty crazy. It was a wild ride, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in like fast-paced mystery thrillers, who wants like that good shock factor. I would highly recommend it. I don't think that it was a 5-star read for me. It's definitely a 4-star, but I still very much enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and I got through it really quick. The next book I ended up finishing in May was The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and this is more of a slow burn mystery thriller. So if you're into those like more atmospheric, slow burn, like whodunit mystery thrillers, this might be for you. For me, it didn't necessarily work all that well. I found some of it to be pretty predictable, and maybe it's because it took me so long to read it. I think like the first 200 pages were boring, and then the last 100 pages were good. So for me, that doesn't make the book worth it for me, especially if I end up predicting what was gonna happen. So I ended up giving it 3 stars because I do think I really enjoyed the atmosphere and some of the characters in the story, maybe like 2 of the characters. But for the most part, they all seemed like cookie cutter, the same person to me. I know that it has worked for a lot of other people and they absolutely loved it. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was still a fun time, but yeah, it was just a little bit too slow. The next book I picked up was The Girl from the Other Side, Volume 3. This is a manga series that I'm like slowly making my way through. It's kind of like a dark fairy tale. We're following this young girl who's being protected by this demon creature named Teacher, and it's like a world where people have like quarantined themselves away from these demon creatures, because if they touch you, you become one, and for some reason this little girl is like cursed or something. And you're just getting little bits of information like each volume. So for me, this one was like a 4.5 star. It was really good. We're getting like more and more information. I'm really getting into this, and I'm just loving the story, and I'm feeling more and more of a connection between these 2 characters. They're so cute together, and I just love it. It's just such a fun manga, and it's definitely a good one, like a good starting point if you're just getting into manga, because this is my first one, and I'm absolutely loving it. The next book I ended up finishing in May was Bunny, a novel by Mona Awad. You guys already know, I gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I am just... It's gonna be like one of my favorite books of all time. I definitely think that I will reread this one in the future. But if you want like any more information about how I felt about this, definitely check out my reading vlog for this, which is spoiler free. If you want some spoilers, watch the live show that's up here. You could even watch, like, I think the first 10 minutes or so of the live show are without spoilers, and I definitely give a spoiler warning. So if you do want to know, like, the ratings of the other hosts and their thoughts, just general thoughts on the book, you could definitely check out the very beginning of that live show. I had such a fun time reading this. It's so weird, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. It was freaking great, and it's definitely one of my new favorites. I'm just now realizing I found some favorites in May. Like, I actually read some really good stuff in May, and I just didn't give May enough credit. I ended up reading Brother by Anya Alborn. I also gave this 5 stars, and this is like another new favorite horror novel. I absolutely love Anya Alborn and her horror. Every time I pick up one, I end up just really, really loving it. So I gave this one 5 stars. This story follows, majority of the time, it's the perspective of Michael Morrow, who is part of this family of serial killers. They all abduct and murder women, and Michael is different. He is not really like them. He doesn't really want this life for himself, but this is all he knows. And it's a very interesting story about Michael and his oldest brother, Rebel. It's obvious that his brother is a lot more twisted than he is, and it's just fucking insane. Like, it's very like Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque, I guess, and if you're into stuff like that, if you're into horror at all, I definitely recommend checking out Anya Alborn. I just always have a really good time with her horror, and she knows how to write them. This one even made me feel stuff. Like, horror doesn't usually give me the feels, but this really did, and the ending and just, everything was just so, so good. The last book I ended up picking up in May was Be Not Far From Me by Minnie McGinnis. And Minnie McGinnis, I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with her books. She writes like all different genres. Like, her books are always so different from each other. And I end up just either really, really enjoying them or really, really not. So I was really curious going in whether or not I would like this one, but it sounded like it was something I would enjoy. It's about this teenager who goes out into the middle of the woods with her friends for a party. Well, she ends up stumbling upon her boyfriend cheating on her with another girl, and she is like totally upset. So she just takes off in the middle of the wilderness and ends up falling into a ravine and getting her leg like hurt really, really bad. And you know, infection starts to spread. It's a very graphic book. That's one thing that Minnie McGinnis does so well, is she will write all the graphic, gory details. But I ended up really, really enjoying this. I haven't read a book in one sitting in a really long time. That's not something that I do very often now, or even before I had my baby. I'm kind of a slow reader, so I don't typically read a book in one sitting or like within 24 hours. I read this book in a day. I ate it up. The writing was just so easy to read, so bingeable, and she just kept the intrigue the entire time, which I don't even know how she did that with, like, she's pretty much just stuck in the woods the entire time. However, the ending wasn't the best. I thought it was a little on the cheesy side, so I couldn't give it a full 5 stars. But I did really, really enjoy this one, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who is into like survival type stories. It's really good. It was really good, and it was super entertaining. Right, now on to what I read in June. So I ended up only reading 5 books in June. Like I said, like, one was a manga, one was a graphic novel, one was written in verse, and it was like a 2-hour long audiobook. I just wasn't feeling the reading in June, so I didn't read a ton, but I did enjoy a lot of what I read. So here's what I read. The first book that I ended up finishing in June was Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a YA mystery thriller where we're following Claudia, whose best friend Monday just suddenly goes missing, and it feels to Claudia like she's the only one who cares. Like, she just doesn't show up to school one day and no one's really all that concerned. Claudia seems to be the only one who wants to know what happened to Monday, where's Monday, what's going on, and she goes to seek out what happened. This is a book I ended up adding on my TBR at the end of last year because I had seen that Natasha from My Reading is Odd, she said this was like one of her favorite books of last year, and it just sounded really good. I obviously love mystery thrillers. I don't read a lot of YA mystery thrillers, but occasionally I will pick one up if it just like really sticks out to me. So I decided to pick up Monday's Not Coming, and I truly enjoyed the story. I found Claudia's family to be so supportive and compassionate. I really liked Claudia's determination to find out what happened to her friend. She was just so brave. I ended up giving it 4 stars. There were some things like the timeline jumping all over the place. There was like the before and then the before the before, and it's just a really weird timeline the way that each chapter is broken up. So that kind of made for a confusing read. I thought the book was a little bit longer than it needed to be, but otherwise it was just so impactful, so gripping, truly a worthy read. I definitely think that if you're iffy about YA mystery thrillers, you typically read adult mystery thrillers, but you are curious about the YA ones, or you're not sure if it's actually worth getting into, I would check this one out. It's definitely one of the best YA mystery thrillers that I've read. The next book I ended up finishing in May was The Roanoke Girls by Amy Engel, and I think I have this to blame for my reading slump. I just couldn't really get into this book. I don't know what it was about it, because it had all the themes that I was really into, like cultish type stuff. It was very dark and disturbing. The atmosphere was all there in the very beginning that like really sucked me in. And then after that, I just didn't really care. Like, I didn't care about the characters all that much. I found like zero connection to anybody, and it made it difficult for me to just continue with the story. So it took me a while to actually end up finishing in this. And then when I did finish it, I just didn't really care that much. Like, it's kind of forgettable in a way. So I think I'm just going to give this one 2.5 stars. And I don't know, I'm kind of sad because I was truly hoping that I would enjoy this. I know a lot of people that did, but for me, just wasn't it. The next book I ended up finishing was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, and this was actually read by him. I ended up listening to the audiobook to this. I haven't read an audiobook in a long time. I kind of put them off for a while because I couldn't get into them. Well, this one was very different. I was into it from the start all the way to the end. Obviously, it was very short. This entire book, from what I understand, is written in verse. But it follows a young man whose brother is shot and killed. And basically this young man goes into his room, he grabs a gun, and he is taking this elevator ride down to go and avenge his brother's death. The entire book is written during this elevator ride. He's reflecting, and there's also these ghosts from his past that are appearing. He's trying to make a decision of what he's going to do. This one also just very gripping, very beautifully written. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I would absolutely love to have just like a physical copy of this book and to reread it because it was just so beautifully done, and I would like to see it in physical form because the audiobook was fantastic. But I would still also really love to see it in physical form. I know that a lot of people have enjoyed this. I'd seen it around probably on BookTube like years ago, but I'm so glad that I finally got around to it, and I feel like I should have read it a long time ago. Next book I ended up reading in June was The Bromance Book Club, and I know my friends are going to come after me for this, but I only gave it 3 stars. I thought it was okay. I don't think that it really stood out to me as all that great. I don't know what it was about it. Maybe it was just not the right time for me to pick up a contemporary romance. It just didn't work for me. I wasn't like all that connected to the characters. I really didn't care all that much about what was going on. I did think some of it was quite humorous, and I liked the uniqueness of the story. That's definitely like a perspective that you don't typically read from. I did truly enjoy what this book was trying to do. The next book I ended up picking up was a graphic novel, and that was Blackbird Volume 1. It's kind of confusing at times, but the artwork in this is absolutely stunning. So we're following this girl whose sister ends up getting like abducted by this giant beast creature or whatever, and then she's kind of sucked into this magical world. It's kind of confusing with the way that the story is written. I don't know if it's like just rushed or something, but the artwork is absolutely beautiful. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I am curious to see where the story goes. I mean, if you like some beautiful artwork in your graphic novels, like pick this one up, try it out. That's all I really have to say about it, because I don't really know what's going on. The last book I ended up finishing in June was The Girl from the Other Side, Volume 4, and I absolutely loved it. I gave this one 5 stars. I think this is my favorite by far. There's a lot of information being revealed. I'm just loving this manga series. Like, it's such a feel-good story, and then just like all these little tidbits of like mystery going on. I don't know. I just really want to know what's going on with these like creatures, how they came about, how they work, like I just need to know the things. So I'm loving it so far, having a great time with it. And like I said, this one's like my favorite so far. Cannot wait to continue with the series. And that's it for my wrap up, guys. I hope that you liked this video today. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I will try to be a little better with my wrap ups and like trying to be on time with them. I'm just struggling balancing everything, so just bear with me and I'll try to have a more consistent schedule. I'm trying my best here. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye.